New Orleans Saints next, also 5-12. They did not hire my guy, Darren Sky Rizzi, as their head coach. I was like campaigning for a Sky Rizzi Kubiak 2025 sign. Did not get it, but I think that they ended up landing in a really good place, which was to get Kellen Moore from the Eagles. I mean, that's a steal. And I'm just speaking as someone who covers the coaching industry very heavily. There were a lot of people who wondered how the Saints got Kellen Moore out of Philly for that job in particular, given that there is not a lot to work with here on this roster. Bringing in Brandon Staley, I think, was a big move at defensive coordinator. Revered guy, really great defensive play caller that just I don't think had the pieces with the Chargers, but another kind of Fangio disciple who can work and understand what Kellen Moore wants. All that said, Derek Carr is now out of the fold. You're starting a second-round pick out of Louisville, likely, or Spencer Rattler, or Jake Haener, or Hunter. Let's not fade on Hunter Deckers either, from Iowa Western, Albert. But that's what your situation is at quarterback. Your meaningful upgrades, if you can call them that this offseason, are Brandon Cooks at the wide receiver position. You bring in a little bit of depth at the tackle position, at the center position. You bring in Jack Stoll at tight end, who's familiar with Kellen Moore. Devon Godchaux at nose tackle. Justin Reed at safety. Isaac Yadam at cornerback. Again, sort of a familiar face there. And so you work on fortifying the offensive line with Kelvin Banks, which is one of my favorite picks in the first round. I think that
to me is the hidden thing, is like their offensive line has a chance to be really good, I think.
We talked about this before. So we're talking about, because here's the weird push and pull of it all. You can't really have a great offensive line and a shitty team.
Right.
Normally, really good offensive line goes hand in hand with great team. Now, I suppose you can say that your quarterback play will be so marginal that it doesn't matter. And whether it's just that he's making mistakes, he's being a rookie, whatever it is. But I think that the optimistic, realistic focal point of this team, and you and I have talked about this on the show, is can you finish the season like whatever PFF does your 10 best units based on their grading scale, which is not perfect, but can you finish top 10 in some of those measurables and really start building that as your core strength? Because I think Kelvin Banks is a monster beast.
Right. And he got dinged a bunch for like a couple really bad games against Georgia and Georgia's got freak shows everywhere. I think it's the offensive line makes them interesting, and generally you can control the pace of play of games and play games on your terms if you have a really good offensive line, which it looks like they're going to have a really good offensive line. The defensive side of the ball is a little iffier. I mean, I don't think they really view Cam Jordan as a starter anymore.
Right.
What is Chase Young? What is Brian Brzee under Brandon Staley? Demario Davis is another one who's older. Like, how much does he have left? Tyrann Mathieu. Like, they've got age on defense, which is a double-edged sword. Can they still play at that level? But you do have the leadership component of it. So I'm gonna throw something at you as far as like a realistic, fair expectation. Either Tyler Shough needs to look like the quarterback of the future, or he's got to be a complete dumpster fire.
Yes, I think that's totally fair, right?
You know what I mean? Like, isn't that
you
a weird
either want
thing to
the number
say?
one pick or you want like the 9th pick, right?
Right. Like, so he's either got to be really good, like, oh man, we got something here. He can't be in the middle, like he can't be like, all right, like maybe he's okay. Because I just think that doesn't serve the team. You know what I mean? Like, if you're
I agree.
the 12th pick, I mean, it's interesting too, because there's such strong connection. I mean, we could talk about the Arch Manning thing, which of course there's a huge connection with Arch and that
he's not
city.
coming out. Everybody,
I don't think he's coming out. We've been over it. But even like Garrett Nussmeier could wind up being a really high pick, right?
Whose dad is the
offensive coordinator.
So amazing.
So like there's like these strong ties to this particular quarterback class too. And they're sort of where I think they're like they're in that interesting spot. They're like where most teams are, like where the Bills were coming out of the Jim Kelly era, where the Dolphins were coming out of the Dan Marino era. This is what happens with most, right? Most teams that have legendary quarterbacks. Most teams aren't like the Niners going from Montana to Young, or the Packers going from Favre to Rodgers to now Love. Most teams, it doesn't look like they're fumbling around for a little while, and that's where the Saints are. And I think, whatever you like about the roster, that's going to hold them back until they get it fixed.
The Nussmeier thing would be just, I mean, it would be a bummer knowing the coaches and the players involved, and like how media wise, if that's the story of the draft, it's just going to make everybody incredibly uncomfortable, because either a dad
Right.
stands on the table and vouches for drafting his kid, and you and I as parents, and me being obviously the best dad, in as my coffee mug says, I would, God, what a strange situation that would be, but it's something that we could have
But
to
he's that good a
discuss.
player. Like, that's
He's
the other
that
part.
good.
He's that good a
He's that
player.
good.
Then, I mean, I had somebody tell me, now this is before Cam Ward, like the narrative on Cam Ward started, but I had someone tell me at the end of the season last year that they thought Nussmeier was the best one they saw, from a pro perspective, right? Like, of the college quarterbacks, that was eligible for the draft. So no, not offending anybody in the Manning family here with that. Only the quarterbacks that are eligible for the draft.
You don't have to
Um,
apologize.
yeah, but I think that would be a really interesting narrative. And again, like, it's a weird thing to say, but yeah, I mean, you either got to have Tyler Shough be really good or really bad. Again, like, just feels weird saying that, but I think there's some reality to it.
Here's how I'll underline it, and then we'll move on. A perfect example of this is the Detroit Lions, because I was thinking in my head of examples of good offensive lines that had bad seasons,
Yeah.
and not necessarily as they were totally constructed, but if you talked to anybody who was associated with the Lions in the years going up to the Dan Campbell takeover and the eventual the switch that flipped, they had some salty dogs on that offensive line, great
Yep.
guys, Taylor Decker, and then when you threw Penei Sewell into the mix, this whole thing,
Ragnow is there. Yeah.
Frank Ragnow was there, and when you were building that thing up, you started developing at least a reputation as ass kickers, but you were
Yep.
still getting those high picks, and you were still being aggressive in the draft to accumulate playmakers. So
Yep.
that's sort of my hope for New Orleans, right? Start to develop a little bit of a salty reputation on that offensive line, start pushing people around, but also, yeah, I mean, get yourself the number one pick. We said it, I think, a couple weeks ago. So if you're listening to the show, I'm sure you're pounding the table, but they
Yep.
haven't had a top 3 draft pick since Reggie Bush. This team needs to start over at premium positions. They just do.